Today we're taking a deep dive into the most disgustingly intriguing bad hygiene habits from the Wild West era, an iconic yet incredibly foul-smelling chapter of U.S. history. Whether it's how seldom folks bathed or how dental hygiene was a term as foreign as Martian language, we've got all the grimy details ready to unravel for you. Outhouses, smelly bug havens. Picture this. In the era of the Wild West, folks had a unique approach to answering nature's call. Yes, while a handful did embrace the solitude of the woods, the majority had a particular structure that was, shall we say, a rustic alternative to our modern-day restrooms. An outhouse. Strategically constructed a stone's throw from the homestead, these outhouses served as a convenient and relatively safer haven for folks to take care of private affairs. The process was fairly straightforward. Families dug a pit within the outhouse, which, when filled to the brim, would be sealed off, a new pit dug, and quite often the outhouse relocated. Now imagine the stench of an outhouse in summer. It's not one you'd find in any Yankee Candle collection, that's for sure. Settlers tried their best to mask the assault by using lime or lye, but the perfume it created was far from Chanel No. 5. Unwanted guests like flies and the notorious black widow spider often claimed these spaces as their domains, and would not hesitate to deliver an unwelcome bite to an unsuspecting user. With toilet paper yet to make its debut on the historical stage, people had to improvise with what Mother Nature offered: leaves, corn cobs, or grass. Undoubtedly, this made the whole experience rather, shall we say, creatively messy. Chewing tobacco, more than just a nasty habit. In our modern world, we've become well acquainted with the addictive and cancer-causing reality of tobacco. But let's rewind to when tobacco chewing wasn't just a vice, it was a gritty necessity. Many a cowboy or farmer under the relentless sun, surrounded by dry, dusty fields, found solace in the simple act of chewing tobacco. This habit served to keep their parched mouths moist amidst the arid landscape. As tobacco chewing rose in popularity during the 19th century, saloons found a way to accommodate their clientele's spitting needs with an innovative solution: the spittoon. These vessels became a ubiquitous sight not only in saloons, but also in pubs, retail stores, and banks. The spittoon may not have been a picture of elegance or cleanliness, but it played a critical role in the Wild West. The sight of a spittoon filled to the brim with discarded tobacco and mud-colored saliva was far from appetizing, but a quintessential element of the scenery back then. Bedding. Don't let the bedbugs bite. In the Wild West, the concept of a comfortable, bug-free bed was more of a luxury than an expectation. Many of the beds at the time were constructed using humble straw and hay, which invariably became a breeding ground for critters, affectionately known as seam squirrels back then, or as we call them in the modern day, lice. The trials of these rudimentary sleeping arrangements were not limited to these tiny terrors. If the bed was located in a not-so-well-insulated building, there was also the incessant worry about mosquitoes drawn by human waste present within the dwelling. Rose Pender, a visitor to the Wild West between 1883 and 88, recounted an arduous night spent wrestling with an army of bugs, ultimately surrendering to a restless, sleepless night. Moreover, the absence of screens on windows of houses back then served as an open invitation for bugs to commute freely between homes and the outhouses, contributing to an unhygienic and unsanitary living environment. Soap, still an essential commodity. Let's remember that the Wild West wasn't completely devoid of cleanliness. Take a stroll down the aisle of any modern drugstore and you'll be greeted by a cornucopia of soaps. Back then, while the array of soap choices wasn't as vast, soap was very much a part of the daily routine. But these bars didn't have the lush touch of cocoa butter or the calming scent of chamomile and lavender we're used to today. Instead, they boasted a simpler, rustic recipe, typically containing animal fat, lye, water, and an assortment of herbs and spices to impart a pleasant aroma. Among the plants leveraged to give the soap its lather was the aptly named soap plant. So even amidst the rough and tumble lifestyle, our Wild West ancestors did strive for a spot of cleanliness, albeit in their own way. Clean water, rare as gold. Water was a precious commodity in the Old West, especially for maintaining any semblance of personal and feminine hygiene. Yet it was often scarce and challenging to come by. Imagine a scenario where a dwelling upstream decided to install an outhouse. It could inadvertently pollute the fresh water downstream. Stagnant water, on the other hand, would become a hub for flies and various other insects whose waste further tainted the precious resource. In an attempt to maintain a supply of cleaner water, people resorted to collecting rainwater in cisterns. But this system wasn't foolproof either, as dust and other contaminants could easily infiltrate the collected water over time. People sought various ways to conserve the precious resource, such as not washing dishes or clothes, or even resorting to cleaning their garments in an already dirtied bathwater. Bathing itself was often a once-a-week affair, and families would share the same bathwater, keeping the idea of cleanliness and hygiene quite different from modern standards. Oral health care, a dental hygienist's worst nightmare. In the Wild West, the conveniences of toothbrushes, toothpaste, and dental floss were not yet introduced. Tooth ailments like cavities or rot typically had one harsh remedy: extraction. Modern dentistry was still a concept of the future, and instead of dentists, one had to endure a visit to a barber or even a blacksmith to bid farewell to the troublesome tooth. The patient would usually be offered whiskey, not for leisurely sips, but to numb the pain and brace themselves for the ordeal. The instrument of extraction, a tool eerily similar to a pair of pliers that would wrench the offending tooth out. Amidst these crude dental practices, the settlers tried their best to maintain oral hygiene. At stagecoach stops and other public establishments, one could find a community toothbrush for common use. As for those pesky food particles lodged between teeth, a trusty knife would do the trick. The Wild West sported an unorthodox approach to dental hygiene. Sickness and disease, a morbid souvenir. The pioneering spirit that drove folks out west was driven by the noble quest of exploring untouched territories and bolstering the nation's expansion. But the reality that greeted these trailblazers was far from the pristine and fresh wilderness they envisioned. Instead, they encountered a cocktail of viruses and bacteria imported from the eastern cities by fellow explorers, and in turn, they introduced new ones into these unexplored lands. Furthermore, medical care was woefully inadequate for the sheer range and severity of health issues that ensued. This grim reality, combined with the lack of effective treatments and preventative measures, led to an unfortunate number of these hardy pioneers succumbing to ailments like influenza, measles, and tuberculosis. Hair care, whiskey, shampoo, and pencil rollers. When you think of Jack Daniels, hair care probably isn't the first thing that springs to mind. But in the Wild West, where necessity was the mother of invention, whiskey was the unlikely hero in many aspects of daily life. Besides its roles as a disinfectant and a painkiller, this potent libation also moonlighted as a hair-washing agent. Folks of the Wild West would whip up a concoction of whiskey, castor oil, and lavender to cleanse their hair. Rinsing was done with rainwater or water softened with borax. Women especially took meticulous care of their locks after a wash. A thorough combing was followed by curling their hair, not with modern ceramic curling irons, but with pencils heated over a fire. Now it's time to hear from you. Do these stories make you appreciate your modern creature comforts and hygiene products a bit more? Let us know in the comments section below.